Welcome back to Power Lunch. Argentina electing a far-right outsider in its presidential elections as the country grapples with one of the world's highest inflation rates and rising poverty. Javier Milei, a former TV pundit, ran on a platform of cutting government spending, which our next guest says is something the country hasn't seen. It's probably 70 years now. Joining us to discuss what this election means for Argentina, the rest of the world, and the dollar is my big question. Michelle Caruso-Cabrera is with us, CNBC contributor, of course. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks.
Very dramatic turn of events here.
What's extraordinary about Javier Milei's win is that in the last 70 years, there hasn't been a single presidential candidate in Argentina that has ever run on cutting spending. Not a leftist, of course, because they would run on spending more,
right,
but not a conservative candidate either. I mean, he ran on cutting spending, cutting subsidies, cutting welfare, reducing the number of ministries,
getting rid of the central bank,
privatizing state-owned assets, and he won handily by 11 points, which in this day and age is basically a mandate, considering how divided the world is.
So can he do what he says he's going to do, or will, quote, the deep state derail him?
So the previous right-wing president, three presidents ago, has brought all of his staff to back him up. So he does have the know-how and the capacity. The likely head of the central bank is someone who's very familiar with the process of dollarization, which is what he wants to do. In other words, they're not going to have an Argentine currency anymore if he gets his way. They're going to use the dollar.
Never held public office before.
No, he hasn't. It's becoming increasingly common in the world, isn't it?
Yes.
He's an outsider. He ran as an outsider. He ran, like Trump, he ran against the swamp, but in Argentina you would call it la casta, the caste, C-A-S-T-E. These are rich politicians. So he's got a lot of stylistic comparisons to Trump, but not economic.
Well, and substantively, he points out that La Casta is the only one who's benefited from whatever system has existed for the past several decades, where the poverty rate's way up, and they were one of the highest GDP per capita countries in the world several decades ago, and now they're like the 170th, poorest country.
They have thousands and thousands of welfare programs, and yet 40% of the population at least live in poverty.
So the fascinating thing to me about this, his platform, his criticism, the fact that he won, all points in a very positive direction for Argentina. But dollarization would be a catastrophe for the economy, at least in the very, very near term. So the question is, how does he really try, and could he succeed in implementing something like this? And it's been not a great policy, is my understanding, for any country that's really tried to dollarize.
So the concept of dollarization is really to take away the power of printing money to lead to inflation, right? It's the same concept behind the euro, right, which is to take away the power of printing from individual governments so that they wouldn't have these constant cycles of high inflation, et cetera, that they had seen in Europe. So it's the same. It's a way to break that linkage. Dollarization, they have no dollars. To dollarize, you need dollars. So, yes, he is going to struggle dramatically. I would say two things. There was going to be incredible inflation no matter what, because in the previous 3 months, the current government had cut taxes and increased spending dramatically. So there was a debt bomb coming anyways. They had already gotten the percentage of government spending as a percentage of GDP to 40%. That's what we did during World War II, and we got to 37% during the pandemic in the United States. So that's the level of spending that they were doing. It's going to be very hard. Probably the first thing he needs to do is he needs to give confidence to exporters. How do you get dollars? You sell wheat overseas. You sell oil overseas. That will bring you hard currency. You need to start building up currency so that way you can start to dollarize if you'd like to do it. But there was going to be massive inflation no matter who won.
But this almost feels like it would be massively deflationary, right? Because the economy would contract so severely, or especially if they were out. So I'm just curious, maybe there's other kind of half measures they could take steps in that direction, but it would be fascinating if he actually tries to do this.
It's going to be painful. I think he won because when you have such a huge percentage of the population suffering under the old way, they'll take a new way. You know who got him into office? Young people and the poor overwhelmingly supported him. They had had enough of what has been, standard operating procedure in Argentina for decades now. So it's going to be dramatically different.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how intensely focused he is on trying to make the Argentine economy more competitive. Like I said, he gets lots of comparisons to Trump. But Trump, for example, is campaigning on imposing tariffs on nearly everything that comes into the United States. Milei wants to eliminate all tariffs and export tariffs. He wants to do all these things that would make Argentina more competitive. At first, it's going to be very painful.
All right. Michelle, we will follow it with great interest. Thank you.
You too.
Appreciate it.